Watch where you're standing, you fool! The words sliced through the chatter and champagne. Every head in the Grand Meridian Ballroom turned toward Victoria Davenport as she glared at the man she thought was just a waiter. But he wasn't. He was Darius Cole, the man about to deliver the night's keynote speech, the man whose signature could decide her father's billion-dollar future. But Victoria didn't know that. Not when she rolled her eyes. Not when she laughed loud enough for the crowd to hear, and certainly not when she tipped her wine glass, spilling deep red across his black suit. The room gasped. Cameras flashed, and when Darius finally looked up, calm and unbothered, his words cut sharper than any insult. You might want to save your apology for the people who'll have to clean up your mistake. Silence. Then, ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our keynote speaker, Mr. Darius Cole. The color drained from her face. That's when the world, and her father, realized what she'd just done. If you believe true class isn't about money, but about character, hit like and subscribe. Because sometimes, the most powerful people are the ones who stay silent until the world finally listens. I'm sorry, miss, Darius Cole said simply, his tone measured and respectful. Victoria rolled her eyes. Just be careful next time. These are limited edition heels, not something you buy at a department store. Several nearby guests glanced over, some smirking, some whispering. No one spoke. Darius gave a small nod. Understood. But she wasn't done. She turned to her two friends, laughing just loud enough for the crowd to hear. This is why they should keep the help on one side of the room. I swear, anyone with a suit thinks they belong here these days. Her words landed like a slap. The room quieted just a little, a hush that carried more weight than any shout could. Darius's assistant, Ava Lynn, who had been standing a few feet away, froze mid-step. Her eyes widened. Miss Davenport, she began carefully, you might want to... But before Ava could finish, Victoria's hand moved. She tilted her glass, and deep red wine splashed across Darius's chest. Gasps rippled through the crowd. Oh my God, I'm so sorry, she said with mock sweetness, pressing a napkin against his jacket. Guess I really did make a mess. Maybe next time they'll hire someone who knows how to stay out of the way. A single camera flash popped. Someone had taken a picture. For a heartbeat, no one breathed. Then, slowly, Darius lifted his gaze to meet hers. His voice was low, calm, every syllable wrapped in control. You might want to save your apology, he said quietly, for the people who'll have to clean up your mistake. The air shifted. Subtle, heavy, something in his tone made even the pianist pause. Victoria blinked, confused. Excuse me? Before she could say more, the master of ceremonies tapped his mic. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome our evening's keynote speaker, Mr. Darius Cole, CEO of Cole Dynamics. Every head turned. Victoria froze. Her smile vanished. Darius didn't move. He simply handed his stained jacket to a nearby attendant, buttoned his vest, and walked past her toward the stage. The crowd parted for him in silence. The same people who had laughed seconds earlier now stared with wide eyes, realization spreading like fire through the room. From the corner, Richard Davenport, Victoria's father and chairman of Davenport Global, rose from his seat, his face paling as he finally understood what his daughter had done. On stage, Darius adjusted the microphone, his composure unshaken. Good evening, he began smoothly. Before we discuss the future of sustainable energy, I'd like to thank our hosts for their hospitality. I can tell this evening will be unforgettable." A ripple of nervous laughter moved through the crowd, polite, uneasy. Victoria's hand trembled around her wine glass. Her friends looked anywhere but at her. As Darius continued, his voice filled the ballroom. Steady, intelligent, magnetic. He spoke about innovation, partnership, and respect in business, every word echoing with layered meaning. He didn't need to call her out. The entire room already understood. When he finished, the applause was thunderous, not because of his speech, but because of what he represented. Grace under humiliation, dignity under disrespect. As he stepped off stage, Richard Davenport intercepted him, forcing a tight smile. "Mr. Cole," he said quietly, "a word, please." Darius met his eyes evenly. "Of course." Behind them, Victoria stood frozen, wine glass still in hand, staring at the red stain drying on the carpet, a stain that mirrored her mistake. Richard's voice was low, urgent. "That was my daughter. I had no idea." Darius nodded once. "You should teach her what real class looks like." Then he walked away. Around the ballroom, whispers turned into murmurs, and murmurs into judgment. Phones were already out. Cameras had caught everything. Ava stepped beside him as he exited through the side doors, whispering, "Sir, that clip's already trending." Darius glanced at her calmly. "Let it." Outside, under the golden lights of the hotel's entrance, he paused. The city hummed beyond the glass, indifferent and vast. He looked down at the faint wine stain still on his shirt sleeve, and smiled faintly. "Some lessons," he said softly, "don't need to be taught twice." Behind him, the sound of frantic whispers echoed through the ballroom, the beginning of a downfall that no one would stop. The next morning, chaos erupted inside the glass-walled boardroom of Davenport Global Headquarters. Reporters were already circling the building like vultures. Every business network had the same headline flashing in red. "Billionaire's daughter pours wine on black CEO, $3.4 billion deal in jeopardy." Inside, Richard Davenport sat at the head of the long mahogany table, jaw tight, his phone buzzing endlessly beside him. He hadn't slept. He didn't need to. Shame had a way of keeping people wide awake. Across from him, executives whispered nervously, scrolling through their tablets. The video was everywhere. 1,000 angles, 1,000 comments. Victoria's face, smug, drunk with arrogance, replayed in slow motion over and over as the internet erupted with fury. Richard slammed his palm on the table. "Turn it off!" The assistant scrambled to mute the screen, but the silence that followed was even louder. At that moment, Darius Cole entered. The door opened quietly, yet the room went still. His posture was calm, too calm, as he stepped inside in a clean, dark blue suit. No stain, no anger, just control. "Mr. Cole?" Richard said, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "I appreciate you coming in on such short notice." Darius took a seat opposite him. "I thought it was necessary." "Of course," Richard said quickly. "Let me start by saying, what happened last night was unacceptable," Darius finished, "and publicly humiliating." "I understand." Richard swallowed hard. "My daughter, she didn't know who you were. It was a misunderstanding, I assure you." Darius tilted his head slightly. "A misunderstanding of respect, perhaps. Not identity." The words landed heavy. Richard hesitated. "We value our partnership, Darius. The merger between Cole Dynamics and Davenport Global means everything to our shareholders, to the industry." Darius leaned back, fingers steepled. Your daughter poured wine on me in front of 300 guests and mocked me because of the color of my skin. That tells me what your company values." The executives shifted uncomfortably. Richard tried again. "Listen, I've already spoken to PR. We'll issue a public apology, pay for any damages, and—" "I'm not looking for money," Darius said quietly. "Then what are you looking for?" Darius looked him straight in the eye. "Change." The word hung in the air. Then, as if on cue, Ava Lynn entered with a folder and set it gently on the table before Darius. He opened it, the official merger agreement, a $3.4 billion partnership that would have doubled Davenport Global's market reach. He slid the folder across the table. "Cole Dynamics is withdrawing from this deal effective immediately." Richard's face drained of color. "You can't be serious." "I am," Darius replied, his tone even. "Integrity is worth more than numbers." "But Darius, Darius raised a hand slightly, stopping him. "Do you know why I came to your gala last night, Richard? Not to make speeches or shake hands. I came because I wanted to believe your family, your company, was different. I thought maybe Davenport Global could represent something modern, inclusive, forward-thinking." He stood, buttoning his jacket. "I was wrong." Across the room, Victoria appeared at the door, pale, disheveled, eyes rimmed red. She had been crying. "Mr. Cole," she started softly. "I didn't mean—" Darius didn't turn to her. "You meant every word. You just didn't expect the world to hear it." Her lip trembled. "Please. I'm sorry." He paused at the doorway, finally glancing at her. His gaze wasn't cruel, only firm. "Next time you raise a glass, Victoria, make sure it's to lift someone up, not tear them down." She broke, covering her mouth with her hand. As Darius walked out, Richard called after him, desperate now. "Darius, think about what you're doing. This deal means thousands of jobs, billions in growth." Darius stopped. "Then maybe you should think about what she did." He didn't look back again. The door closed behind him, sealing the room in silence. For several seconds, no one spoke. The air was heavy with realization, not just of what was lost, but of how easily it had been thrown away. Victoria sank into a chair, whispering, "Dad, I didn't know." Richard turned to her slowly, eyes sharp with something colder than anger. "You didn't care. That's the problem." His voice broke as he stared at the contract lying on the table, unsigned, meaningless now. Outside, through the floor-to-ceiling windows, reporters gathered in a storm of flashing lights and microphones. The story was no longer just about a spilled drink. It was about arrogance, power, and the cost of disrespect. In the parking lot below, Darius's car waited. Ava opened the door, watching her boss with quiet admiration. "Sir," she said softly, "you just walked away from the biggest deal of your career." Darius nodded. "And I gained something bigger." "What's that?" "Peace." As the car pulled away, the sun broke through the morning clouds. Not dramatic, just quiet and sure, like the kind of light that doesn't need to prove anything. And somewhere behind him, a billionaire's empire began to crack, not from competition, but from one moment of pride too blind to see its own reflection. By noon, the story had become impossible to contain. The clip of Victoria Davenport spilling red wine across Darius Cole's suit had reached every corner of the internet. News anchors replayed it with slow-motion zooms and captions like, "When arrogance meets karma." In one viral tweet, a user wrote, Imagine mocking a man who could buy your father's company twice over. The audacity is generational. Within hours, #Cole Dynamics was trending globally. Investors began dumping Davenport Global stock before the markets even closed. At 3 p.m., CNBC aired a breaking headline. Cole Dynamics terminates $3.4 billion merger with Davenport Global. Shares plummet 27%. If you're still watching, then you can feel the entire Davenport Global flipping upside down. Please like and subscribe. It means the world to us. Inside the corporate tower, chaos reigned. Assistants ran down hallways clutching folders, phones rang endlessly, and board members yelled into Bluetooth headsets trying to stop the bleeding. In his corner office, Richard Davenport stood at the window, staring down at the grid of Manhattan traffic. He looked like a statue about to crack. "Sir," said Eleanor Briggs, the company's PR director, stepping in nervously. "We're being shredded in the press. The morning talk shows are calling Victoria the wine witch. Every diversity and business organization is condemning us." Richard's tone was cold. "And the shareholders?" "They're furious. There's already talk of an emergency meeting to remove you as chairman." He turned, eyes burning. "Over one stupid mistake?" Eleanor hesitated. "It wasn't just a mistake, sir. It was a message, and people heard it loud and clear." Richard slammed his hand on the desk, the sound echoing. "Get my daughter in here." Moments later, Victoria appeared, pale, wearing sunglasses, mascara smudged. "Dad, please, I didn't mean for—" He cut her off. "Do you have any idea what you've done? That man you insulted was the one I've been trying to impress for months. This merger was supposed to save us from the energy losses last quarter." Tears gathered at the corners of her eyes. "I said I was sorry." "Sorry doesn't fix a $3.4 billion hole," Richard hissed. She swallowed hard. "I didn't know who he was." "That's exactly the point," he roared. "You shouldn't have to know who someone is to treat them with respect." His voice cracked, echoing off the glass. Outside, reporters' cameras clicked from the sidewalk. The family's security tried to block the view, but it was too late. The image of a fallen empire was already spreading. Meanwhile, across the city, the atmosphere at Cole Dynamics headquarters couldn't have been more different. The office buzzed with quiet pride. Staff whispered about their boss with admiration. Screens displayed glowing headlines. "Darius Cole takes stand for integrity." "Grace over greed, CEO chooses principles over profit." Inside his office, Darius sat with Ava Lynn, reviewing the morning's market reports. "Davenport's stock just hit a 10-year low," Ava said. "Their board might not survive this week." Darius nodded slightly. They built their empire on image. One crack, and it all shows. Ava studied him for a moment. "You're not celebrating." He smiled faintly. "There's nothing to celebrate in someone else's downfall. But there's always something to learn." "Which is?" "That power without respect is just noise." Ava exhaled slowly. "The world's calling this the most graceful retaliation they've ever seen." Darius chuckled softly. "I didn't retaliate. I just stepped aside and let their actions speak louder." There was a knock at the door. Mark Chen, a journalist from Global Business Weekly, entered. "Mr. Cole, thanks for seeing me. The world wants to hear your side of what happened." Darius gestured for him to sit. "There's not much to tell, Mr. Chen. A misunderstanding happened. I chose not to make it worse." Mark smiled. "That decision has inspired millions. Would you like to issue a public statement?" Darius thought for a moment. "Just one line." Mark readied his pen. Darius spoke slowly, his voice calm. Respect is not a privilege you earn after success. It's the foundation that builds it. Mark nodded, eyes bright. That's going to be quoted everywhere. Darius smiled gently. Then I hope people listen. By evening, that single quote had become the story's heartbeat. It was printed on news banners, reposted on LinkedIn, and even turned into motivational posters across business circles. Meanwhile, the Davenports faced their reckoning. A video leaked from inside their boardroom, voices shouting, papers slamming. The board demanded Richard's resignation. Within 48 hours, he stepped down to restore confidence. Victoria vanished from public view. Her social media accounts disappeared, and the family's PR team issued a brief, hollow statement about learning and growing from this experience. But the damage was irreversible. Their empire had fallen, not from economic failure, but from one careless act of arrogance. In contrast, Darius's company gained global respect overnight. Investors poured in. Emails flooded with new offers. People weren't just buying into his company, they were buying into his values. That night, Darius sat on his balcony overlooking the city skyline. The lights shimmered below, reflections of power that once tempted him. Ava joined him, 2 cups of tea in hand. You know, she said quietly, you could have crushed them completely. Publicly humiliated her, sued them for defamation, destroyed everything they had. Darius took the cup, his eyes calm. That would make me like them. He looked at the city again, calm, grounded, at peace. True power, he said softly, doesn't need to shout. It just stands still and lets the world adjust. Ava smiled faintly, and the world did. As the wind shifted, a news helicopter hovered somewhere in the distance, capturing the lights of a city that now whispered one name with reverence: Darius Cole, the man who turned humiliation into history. 3 days later, Richard Davenport stood in the marble lobby of Cole Dynamics Tower, waiting. He wasn't used to waiting. Not for meetings, not for people, and definitely not for men like Darius Cole. But things had changed. Cameras outside had captured his arrival, broadcasting the image of a fallen billionaire coming to beg forgiveness from the man his daughter humiliated. When Ava Lynn appeared, clipboard in hand, her tone was polite but unyielding. Mr. Davenport, Mr. Cole will see you now. She led him into a wide, sunlit conference room overlooking the skyline. Darius stood by the window, hands in his pockets, calm as ever. Richard tried to smile. Darius, thank you for seeing me. Darius turned, expression unreadable. You didn't leave me much of a choice. The press seems fascinated by this meeting. Richard laughed awkwardly. Yes, well, I wanted to speak in person. Man to man. Darius gestured for him to sit. Then let's do that. For a moment, silence filled the room, not awkward, just heavy. Richard cleared his throat. I came here to apologize. What my daughter did was shameful. She's been humiliated enough, and I've paid dearly for it. Darius studied him. You haven't paid. You've lost. There's a difference. Richard's shoulders stiffened. I'm not here to argue. I'm here to make things right. We can still salvage the merger. Our board is willing to make generous concessions. Name your terms. Darius's expression didn't change. You think this is about leverage. Isn't it always? Richard said softly. You're a businessman. So am I. Darius stepped closer, his tone even. No, Richard. This isn't business. This is character. Richard's eyes flickered, defensive, tired. We all make mistakes, Darius. You've made your point, but you've also made me your enemy in the market. Are you sure that's wise? Darius smiled faintly. An enemy implies equality. You don't have that anymore. Richard's jaw tightened. Darius continued, voice quiet but sharp. Your daughter treated me like I didn't belong. She assumed money gave her permission to disrespect someone who looked different. Now you've come here to fix it, because it cost you billions. That's not remorse, Richard. That's damage control. Richard looked down, defeated. Then what do you want from me? Darius exhaled slowly. Nothing. I don't need to take anything from you. Life already did. He turned towards the window again. But I will tell you this. Power built on arrogance always collapses. It's not race or wealth or titles that bring people down. It's the belief that anyone is beneath you. For the first time, Richard had no words. The weight of the truth pressed harder than any deal ever had. Darius turned back, extending a hand. I forgive your daughter. But not for her sake, for mine. I refuse to carry her ignorance any longer. Richard hesitated, then shook his hand. His grip was weak, trembling. When he left the building minutes later, reporters swarmed him with microphones. Mr. Davenport, did he agree to the merger? Is the feud over? Richard paused, his voice hollow. There's no feud, he said quietly. Only a lesson. As his car drove off, Darius watched from above, calm, steady, already moving on. Ava entered softly. That was gracious of you. Darius smiled. No, it was necessary. The city outside shimmered in gold, reflecting the quiet power of a man who'd already won, not by revenge, but by rising higher than arrogance could ever reach. A week later, the ballroom of the Empire International Hotel overflowed with cameras and reporters. The banner behind the stage read, Cole Dynamics Global Energy Announcement. The world had already watched the Davenport's empire collapse after the viral gala video. But today, everyone wanted to know what Darius Cole would do next. At exactly 10 o'clock, he walked on stage. Calm, sharp suit, no arrogance, just quiet power. Good morning, he began. His voice carried effortlessly. Last week reminded us that integrity matters more than status. Arrogance can cost billions, and respect can build more. The room went silent. He continued, Today, I'm proud to announce a partnership with a company that understands those values. The screen behind him lit up. Horizon International, Davenport Global's fiercest rival. Gasps, shouts, flashbulbs. Darius didn't flinch. Horizon stood for respect long before they stood for profit. Together we're building the cleanest global energy network in history. Applause thundered. Some journalists stood up. Others just stared, realizing what had happened. The $3.4 billion deal Davenport lost now belonged to Horizon. At the back of the hall, Mark Chen, the reporter who first broke the story, murmured to his cameraman, That's what real revenge looks like. Across the city, Richard Davenport watched from his study. The TV replayed Darius's words as he sat slumped in silence, tie undone, whiskey untouched. When the valuation flashed on screen, $4.1 billion, $1 billion more than his canceled deal, his chest tightened. He'd lost everything that mattered to him. But worse, he'd lost it to the man his daughter had humiliated. Behind him, footsteps. Dad? Victoria stood at the doorway. No makeup, her usual confidence gone. I watched the conference, she said softly. He didn't gloat. He just spoke truth. Richard didn't respond. I was cruel, Dad. And he handled it with more dignity than I ever could have. He turned slowly, his eyes heavy. You can't undo what happened, Victoria. But you can learn from it. She nodded, fighting tears. Then that's what I'll do. The screen showed Darius shaking hands with Horizon's CEO as applause filled the hall. Richard lowered his head. Maybe he deserved that win. Back at the hotel, reporters crowded Darius as he stepped off the stage. Mr. Cole, Mark Chen called out. If you could say one thing to the Davenports, what would it be? Darius paused. Cameras zoomed in. I'd say thank you, he replied quietly, for reminding the world that respect isn't something money can buy, it's something you show. The room fell silent. He nodded politely, then walked past the cameras, leaving behind the echo of truth. Outside, sunlight spilled across the city skyline. Darius stood beside Ava Lynn, his trusted assistant, as they exited through the hotel doors. You know you just ended the Davenport's legacy, she said. He smiled faintly. No, they ended it themselves. I just showed the world how. She grinned. So what's next? He looked up toward the sky. We keep building. But this time, with people who remember that power without respect isn't power at all. They stepped into the car as the press swarmed behind them. Above the streets, a new billboard already displayed his words in bold letters. Respect is the foundation of success. If stories like this remind you that respect is worth more than reputation, hit like and subscribe, so you never miss the next story where quiet strength turns arrogance into regret, and dignity wins without saying a word.